Hey, this is Senator Justin Reedy coming to you here at the end of the 10th week of the General Assembly session. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone out there. I'm going to be heading back into the Senate chamber not too long after I record this video for the second of a double session here on Friday. But we're almost to what's called crossover. After Monday, a bill that does not pass the Senate by Monday over to the House is going to have a lot tougher time passing, because if it were to pass later over to the House, it would be stuck in some different procedural hurdles that make it a lot harder, and vice versa. So there's been a flurry of activity. This has been the busiest week of the legislative session, and probably with the exception of the final week of the session, this is the busiest week we'll have. There has been so much happening that it's really hard to boil it down, but just a couple of major items from earlier in the week, and then I'll talk about what we're doing right now, basically. Earlier in the week, the General Assembly passed, the State Senate passed what I know in my heart to be an unconstitutional bill, SB1, deals with basically adding new restrictions back onto concealed carry permit holders. We had a Supreme Court decision that struck down Maryland's unconstitutional law that required people to prove why they needed a concealed carry permit. But what the General Assembly did in this bill they passed, SB1, is it came in very radical, almost restricting the ability of you to carry a firearm, even with a permit, almost anywhere. It got heavily amended, but it still puts restrictions on a number of places where someone who is a licensed permit holder for a concealed carry permit, it puts a number of restrictions on where you can carry that. I believe it still bold-faced violates the Bruin decision from the Supreme Court. I opposed it. I spoke against it on the floor. We attempted to amend the bill further and were not successful. I had a video that I put out earlier this week about that. So that is going over to the House, and they'll have a version of the bill coming over here. We will see where it ends up, but it will be taken to court right away. We also spent, earlier this week, there was a lot in the news that the Governor Moore has announced that he wants to mandate that we do what California has said they're going to do: get rid of all gas-powered vehicles, light trucks and cars, by 2035. That Maryland will no longer have any gas-powered vehicles by then. Here's what's interesting about that, and I did a couple of short videos that we'll be putting out with our weekly update email. I think, number one, it's a bit of a political stunt and a distraction. It's 12 years in the distance. Technology is going to change so much in the next few years. To have some mandated locked in, we're going to all do electric cars by then, is kind of ridiculous in itself. And it's really just a part of the rush. I think the governor wants to be kind of on the cutting edge of every progressive liberal policy he can. Unfortunately, I say that. But also our electric grid, which we have serious issues. Our electric grid right now is already a bit overtaxed in Maryland and on the eastern seaboard. Some of the problems they've seen in California are going to be here as well. So we have 1% of our fleet of consumer cars and vehicles right now that are operating in Maryland are electric. We're going to have to go from 1% to, the bill tries to get us to like 20 or 25%, not the bill, but the order tries to get us to 20 or 25% electric cars in the next few years. Just to do that would put such a tremendous strain on our infrastructure. And the reason our infrastructure is so overtaxed, electrification can make sense for some things, but when you try to force it and you don't have and then you're rejecting affordable, clean, and available sources of electricity production, which we do because we don't want production that comes from coal, we don't want production that comes from natural gas, we don't want nuclear apparently. You're going to tax your electric grid, and consumers are going to have to pay, ratepayers will have to pay more and more and more. So that is something to really be watching. But that was a big announcement that came out earlier this week. And it's just not the right policy, no matter what you think. Number one, I don't think the government should be mandating. We should be incentivizing creation of new technologies. But mandating, it doesn't make sense, particularly locking us into one form of technology. So that brings us to later this week. We've been spending a lot of time on the floor, and there are just tons of different issues that we're tackling. And in many cases, I've been trying to lead the fight against what I think are some really bad policies. There have been some good bills that have passed, and I look forward to breaking those down in the future. But one issue that we're literally working on the floor right now is trying to aggressively expand Maryland's wind energy wind energy generation portfolio. And it's something that was created over a decade ago, and we've barely done. We've not come anywhere close to the goals for wind energy production in Maryland. But ratepayers have been subsidizing it monthly since we created it in about 2013. But now they're increasing the goals, and they want to increase the amounts of what ratepayers and probably also ultimately taxpayers will have to subsidize, all to try to create more wind energy. Which wind energy can work great in some parts of the country. Here, it's very expensive to get the infrastructure up and running. Of course, the people who support it say it's a jobs creation bill, which means, quite frankly, the unions want it for these union jobs building these big turbines. But I say it's sort of like saying we're going to build roads, but we're going to do it all by hand. If we expanded our nuclear capacity, and if we stopped being so paranoid about other forms of energy, we could have access to a lot more affordable and in many cases relatively clean and renewable types of energy. But the focus of, again, the sort of the hard left progressive agenda is wind. And so that's going to be, we've got a bill on the floor we're trying to speak some reason into here at the end of the session. And then finally, we're going to be working in the next few days on the state's budget. On the state's budget, I'm going to have a lot more on that next week. Really engaging hard in the fight to restore boost funding, which I think we may have some good news on in the Senate coming up, hopefully. And we're watching out for a lot of other sort of bad bills that are lurking, including bills that try to take away local county school boards' autonomy in the area of curriculum. And we're fighting very hard to kill those bills and defeat those bills in the Senate. So that was a whole lot, and I was talking very fast. So maybe you might need to watch this video twice. But again, thank you for the opportunity to serve you. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them or contact my office. And look forward to updating you again next week. Thanks a lot.